Welcome to the Autism Alliance of Michigan Skill Building Series. I am Megan Koss, an occupational therapy consultant for the Autism Alliance of Michigan. In this webinar, we will be focusing on strategies for developing self-feeding skills for your loved one with autism. Feeding ourselves is something we don't always stop and think about. It's a natural process for humans to eat, and many of us enjoy it. We learn to eat by watching others, mimicking our parents or siblings, and learning to enjoy the process. We develop skills to use utensils and cups as toddlers as we develop our fine motor skills. Self-feeding comes in many forms. We eat potato chips with our hands from a bag. We cut meat with a fork and knife. We drink from an open cup, or maybe from a straw, and we scoop ice cream with a spoon. Each type of food has its own set of rules or requirements for eating it properly. These rules may vary between families, cultures, or settings. For example, it's okay to eat a certain food with your hands at home, but at a fancy restaurant, it might be more proper to use a fork and knife. Like our other ADL skills, it's important to consider the sensory, motor, and visual concerns that come along with self-feeding. Some sensory concerns may include the texture of food, smell, sight, and taste of food. Motor and visual considerations may include how to hold a spoon or fork properly, scooping or stabbing accurately, using both hands together for cutting or stabilizing our bowl or plate, and coordinating and grading the tilt of a cup when lifting it to your mouth. It is also important to consider the social concerns that come along with eating, since eating usually or can happen in a social situation. Does the person have body awareness to know when their hands and face are soiled? Are they concerned with chewing with their mouth open? There are a number of other social considerations amongst different cultures and family traditions or expectations that exist. So, what are some strategies that can help those with autism learn to self-feed? Stabbing with a fork requires good eye-hand coordination, manual dexterity, precision, and strength. Hand-over-hand practice is a good place to start. This involves the parent performing the act of stabbing a food and bringing it to the individual's mouth with your own hand placed over theirs on the fork. Initially, you can provide the strength for the grip on the fork and the coordination of bringing the food from the plate to the mouth. After a few stabs, you can ease up and give a little less assistance. By doing this, you are still acting as an aid, but the individual begins to do more of the task for themselves. You can still jump in and add more assistance if needed. By fading away over time, they become independent. Initially, the food they stabbed should be large enough to make an easy target and soft enough to easily pierce. If the food is slippery, it might be a good idea to have a plate with a high rim to prevent the food from falling off the plate. Stabbing can be practiced using balls of Play-Doh or soft candy. Now, we will discuss some strategies to help with teaching scooping. Scooping requires good eye-hand coordination, manual dexterity skills, fine motor precision, and bilateral hand skills. Scooping can be practiced using dry beans or rice, water pouring and dumping from one container to another, using a measuring cup or a large spoon. Target practice. This can be done by filling a bowl with several beads of the same color, for example, yellow beads, and then mixing in one red bead. The individual then has to scoop out just the red bead. This can help develop visual skills and fine motor precision. Of course, you can always provide hand-over-hand support like we discussed previously, or use a bowl with a lip or suction to prevent food or the bowl from spilling. Cutting can be a daunting task. It requires good safety skills, bilateral hand skills, eye-hand coordination, precision, strength, and dexterity. For cutting practice, there are plenty of Velcro food toys available that can be used with a smooth play knife. Play-Doh balls can be used to cut in half. Hand-over-hand practice can be used for using a real knife Or a rocker knife can be a safe alternative if the individual does not have all of the motor and coordination skills needed for a real sharp knife. Drinking from a cup can be difficult for any individual learning since it requires a good deal of oral mechanics, eye-hand coordination, dexterity, and grading the tilt of the cup. It might be easiest to avoid messes by using a straw cup. These are perfectly acceptable cups. For an individual with autism, it might be helpful to practice the coordination and tilt grading by dumping water from one container to another or using hand-over-hand practice so they can feel your pressure and tilt grading under your hands. Another consideration for drinking in general is that those with autism aren't always motivated to drink enough fluids. Whether they simply aren't aware that it's necessary or they may not remember if it's not a part of their routine. Setting a reminder timer to take a sip of water or keeping a full cup in a familiar place might help to improve the chances of them getting enough water throughout the day to keep them healthy and hydrated. Of course, we don't eat all foods using utensils. There are some foods that require us to use our hands. This can be particularly troublesome for individuals with autism, as they may be defensive to touching the food if they don't like the texture of it on their hands. Handheld foods like chips or pizza might be too messy to tolerate touch. Foods can be cut up, might help them better tolerate it if they don't have to touch it or bring it to their mouth. A napkin should always be nearby so that they have the option to wipe their hands or face immediately if they choose to. Ultimately, sensory play with these non-preferred foods is a great way to improve their tolerance. Still having trouble? If you feel like your child is still having trouble with self-feeding skills, it may be a good idea to request an occupational therapy evaluation. OTs can evaluate and come up with individualized strategies for ADL independence, sensory needs, motor concerns, and visual processing skills. Thank you for participating in this webinar. Feel free to check out some of the other ADL webinars for bathing and dressing.